Basically, the beginning was my beginning. Basically, I was born in May '68 in Zurich, and I always say that I was born a second time when I was 17 years old in May '85 in Zurich, when I visited for the first time the studio of Fischli Weiss. It was at the moment when Fischli Weiss were doing Lauf der Dinge, and that was a true epiphany to see this studio, to meet them. And it was somehow this very day that I decided that I wanted to work with artists, and then became a curator and did my first exhibition in my kitchen, which I had as a student in St. Gallen. So somehow that was really the beginning. And so conversations were always the whole point of departure. The conversations, infinite conversations with artists were all I did. And it's out of these conversations that exhibitions grew, books grew, my writing. I mean, everything started with these conversations. At a certain moment, I read a lot of David Sylvester and his conversation with Francis Bacon, because Sylvester, I believe a lot in this idea that it's not about a sprint, but it's a marathon. So it means 10, 20, 30 years of dialogue. These are the real dialogues. No? So Sylvester spoke to Bacon for so many years, and then it became this amazing book. And this book was such an inspiration. Similarly, Pierre Cabane with Marcel Duchamp, Brassai with Picasso. At a certain moment I thought maybe it would be a good idea, not even to publish it, but just to have a record and to start to record these conversations with artists. And the beginning it was on little micro cassettes, these dictaphones, which no longer exist. And then I bought maybe in 93, 94, I started to buy the first sort of smaller digital video camera with the mini DVD cassettes. And ever since I've recorded and I filmed this conversation. And there's so far about 2,000 hours. And it's really not my main activity. My main activity is to curate exhibitions, is to run an art institution. I'm co-director of the Serpentine Gallery, but it's always been a parallel activity, is to just record conversations I have. So I then started to publish them as books, and there are lots of different ways how one can publish these conversations. Obviously, the unrealized project is that one could write books. Stats Terkel, who is somehow one of my heroes, a great American oral historian, he started at a certain moment to write books based on conversations, and that's something I've not done yet. That might be the next step. However, what I have done is published, many of these interviews in the conversation series with Walter Koenig. We publish all the interviews I've done with one artist, and these become somehow, that's the Sylvester model. In the series with Carta, which is basically the sampling, of Volume 1 and Volume 2, we bring together the sort of variety of the project, artists, but also the connection from art to literature, to music, to architecture. So these are more transversal kind of trajectories. They're more like walks through knowledge. And then at the same time, there are the books where the interviews are, sorted according to cities. All the interviews, for example, I did in China. That's a new book. Or one could also, categorize or basically order them according to certain questions. For example, I ask in all the interviews the question of what's your unrealized project. I ask the question, what's your Rainer Maria Rilke type of advice to a young artist or to a young architect. So these could also be books. So it's all been about books. And then the invitation came to Venice, and it's the first time that that happens, because I'm always invited to, when I'm invited to do things, I'm invited to curate things. And this is the first time I'm basically invited to participate in an exhibition as an architect. And Sejima-san rang me about 6-8 months ago and suggested that she would very much like to show my interview project as part of the Biennale. And so that was a possibility, and also forced me for the first time to think what one could do with this archive. So the idea was to basically make a first inventory. I mean, the wall of names was Sejima's idea, and to have that in the chronology of birthdays. It starts like with, Alfred Gorm, Pierre Klosowski at the very left, top on the left. These are all artists, philosophers, thinkers who are born in 1899, 1901. People I met at the very beginning of my professional life, who now would be 110, 115 years old, who basically are really people whose eyes saw the 20th century. And we thought it's interesting, this idea of the chronology, because it will also show that through the disciplines, because it's completely science meets art meets architecture. All of a sudden there is one way of actually reading this whole list. And it's not a complete list. We're still working on the inventory, which should be in the next couple of months completed. But it was an idea to visualize for the first time a map. It's a kind of a mental, I suppose it's also a mental map. It's the people I met, the people who inspired me, the people who influenced my own thinking, are kind of all mapped on this cartography.